What's up guys, Rick with Rally Sport Direct here, and today I'm going to show you how we installed the ReadyLift 2-inch lift kit on our 2018 Crosstrek. Now this is a pretty easy install, but yields some pretty amazing results, so let's get started. First thing we need to do is get the car up in the air and get the tires off. Now let's work on getting the front struts off. Start by removing the ABS line and brake line from the strut. Then we'll want to go ahead and remove the 17mm end link nut. Then mark the position of the upper 19mm camber bolt, break the two large 19mm nuts loose, and remove the bolts. Now moving up top, we want to remove the three 14mm nuts holding the strut to the car. Now before you remove that last nut, make sure to support the strut from underneath, and then you can finally zip it off and remove the strut from the car. Then once the fronts are done, we can move on to the rear. So take your trunk liner out, then you'll remove the jack wrench and use a panel removal tool to pop out the little plastic clips. Then you can pull the rear suspension covers off. Now we can remove the two 14mm nuts on the strut tops, and then we can move to the lower portion. Once under the car, you're going to see the two 17mm nuts on the lower control arm. You can go ahead and break those free, and you should be able to easily remove the bolts. Now you can let the control arm hang, and you should be able to remove the strut assembly. And now's a good time to clean up the struts, more specifically where the spacers will attach to the top hats. Now we can grab our ReadyLift spacers and position them onto the struts. Do note that they are left and right specific, and of course will be marked with an L and an R. Now grab the factory strut top nuts and we can install the spacers onto both front and rear struts. The fronts are super easy, just thread down the nuts by hand and then grab your 14mm wrench and tighten them down to 30 foot-pounds. And for the rear, I actually found it easiest to lift the spacers slightly, giving you a bit more room to thread the nuts down onto the studs. And these will also be torqued to 30 foot-pounds. With the lift spacers installed, next we can install the end link spacers onto the front struts. Now this is optional at this point because you can either do it on the bench or when you're actually installing the suspension back into the car. But you do want to note the orientation. The bolt and the concave side of the spacer faces toward the front of the car. Now it's time to get the suspension back onto the car, and let's start with the rear. Position the strut on top of the rear control arm and guide the upper strut into the two holes in the chassis. Now if you haven't loosened up the inner control arm bolts yet, the control arm will actually hold the strut in place. Then you can move to the trunk and use the supplied hardware to secure the strut to the chassis. Moving back underneath, we need to slide the bolt through the strut and the control arm. So grab a jack and carefully guide the control arm up and to the hub, and then once aligned, you can go ahead and insert the bolts. Now we chose to compress the strut and spring on the lift before we went ahead and torqued everything down, but you could also do this on the ground as well. Now moving on to the front, lift the strut up into the wheel well and position the top hat such that the R logo is facing towards the outside of the car. Once in place, secure the strut top to the car with the supplied hardware. The torque on these is 30 foot-pounds. Raise the hub into place and put the factory bolts in to secure the strut to the hub, noting that the camber bolt goes on top and the standard bolt on bottom. Rotate the camber bolt until the marks you made previously line up and tighten the large 19mm nuts. Now we can reinstall the brake and ABS line onto the strut. Now for additional clearance, the brake line bracket will be installed on the top side of the bracket on the strut. And now we can install the end links. Go ahead and grab the 1/4 inch spacer that's provided and put it on the end link stud. Then you can install the end link back into the strut. Now the factory torque specs on the end links is 45 foot-pounds. With both front and rear struts installed, we can now mount the wheels and tires. If everything looks good, we can install the factory foam, plastics, and trunk liner back into the car. Now it's never a bad idea to double check all your suspension bolts, put a wrench on them, just make sure they're all torqued down and nice and tight. And that's it, you're done with the install. Now you can go ahead and enjoy that extra ground clearance and, well, have yourself a blast. And that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, or at least learned something. Now, we didn't follow the instructions to an absolute T, but if I completely mess something up, let everybody know down in the comments below. It'd actually be a huge help to the community as a whole. If you guys are interested in a lift kit for your Subaru, I'll throw a link down in the description. Now, it doesn't matter which brand you go with, we're all trying to get the same thing, which is basically this. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, give me a thumbs up. It actually helps us out quite a bit. And if you want to see more like this, hit the subscribe button. But that's all the time I've got for you today. See you guys next time.